One of the most defining characteristics of the first Assassin's Creed were the crowds. That's what has made that game feel truly next-gen at the time. The jump from technologies of PlayStation 2 and Xbox to PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 has allowed the developers to create large, intricate, climbable cities full of NPCs surrounding you in a way that has never been seen before. And then in 2009 came Assassin's Creed Bloodlines for PlayStation Portable, developed by Griptonite Games. Now, it should be noted that a PSP would be about the same power as a PS2, meaning that it wouldn't be able to hold large, complex, climbable environments, nor would it be able to showcase big crowds. And yet, Bloodlines doesn't try to go for an alternative Assassin's Creed experience, but to essentially recreate PS3 technology on a PS2. This is very ambitious to say the least, so let's see if the game succeeds. Since Bloodlines is based in many ways on Assassin's Creed 1, I would advise you to first watch the video about that part if you haven't already, so it'd be easier to understand both the similarities and differences. The link is in the description and YouTube cards. My name is Stanislav Costiuc, I am a game designer, and this is my review of Assassin's Creed Bloodlines for PSP, which as always will be done with the help of my Stasocritic scoring system, starting with the first category, Design. This is the most important part of Stasocritic with the biggest weight, as the way a game is played and designed is what defines our experience the most. In my videos, I often talk about design in a way that purely relates to player experience, without going too much into how technical limitations and gameplay affect one another. But working with the limitations is actually a big part of the game design profession, and going around limitations to create the desired experience is what our job is often about. Assassin's Creed Bloodlines is the perfect example of this because it tries to recreate a next-gen experience as closely as possible on the platform that can't handle that kind of experience. As such, even though the game takes all the pillars from Assassin's Creed, social stealth, combat and parkour, they're not a one-to-one representation of what you'll find in the big console brother. For example, while the basics of freerunning are the same, you hold the high profile and legs button to run and jump across the environments, some very important actions work differently or are missing entirely. If you try to side eject in this game while running up the wall, you'll find that Altair is not trying to reach a higher surface but a lower one instead, which can lead to some unfortunate situations. But not as unfortunate as the fact that there is no mid-air grab button, you can only grab surfaces when dropping down from hanging ledges. Now, you might remember that in Assassin's Creed this action was imperative in fixing weird behavior and mistakes Altair often makes when trying to parkour, and Bloodlines not only has a lot of the same issues, but even more. Pretty often you'll find that Altair's jump aiming is off, or sometimes he simply doesn't process that there is an object you can jump on, while at other times he processes it just fine and completes the action successfully. Sometimes Altair's response is not sensitive enough and he makes little stops before actually moving on to jump again, and other times his controls are too sensitive, which can lead to other kinds of unfortunate consequences. Parkour can feel very inconsistent, though at least Altair is not the only one having trouble with navigation here. And it's a pity because Bloodlines features a lot of really nicely designed freerunning paths across its different areas. Assassin's Creed 2, which was released alongside Bloodlines, will try to drastically increase the amount of climbable handholds in comparison to the original game, making it so you can climb and jump pretty much everywhere. Bloodlines physically can't go far enough like that, so in this regard it is actually closer to the first Assassin's Creed. Not every wall is full of climbable handholds, and you have to be mindful of where and how you move to find your path through the environments. And it's very enjoyable when it works, not so much when it doesn't, and you have no tools to fix the game's mistakes this time. Parkouring is also when you will feel the absence of the right stick on a PSP the most. To control the camera, you have to hold the left bumper and then use different face buttons to rotate it, which is very cumbersome when you need to frequently look around while on rooftops, though to be fair, just pressing the left bumper to recenter the camera will be enough for navigation most of the time. When it comes to combat, Bloodlines recreates the core mechanics from Assassin's Creed pretty faithfully, to the point that a lot of animations are actually the same. It even fixes some of the problems the console version of Assassin's Creed had. For example, enemies can't counter anymore, so you're not discouraged from going on the offensive this time. And there is one little but important mechanical addition to your counterattacks. You have to point with a stick in the direction of the enemy you're trying to counter, so they would be an active target. So while counters still remain pretty overpowered, this little additional input does wonders to make it feel more balanced. Some enemies are able to do feint moves, so if you're trigger happy with your counters, you can be punished for that. Altair can't counter while a failed counter animation plays, and someone else might attack during this window. So there are actual improvements over the system from the console Assassin's Creed. Sadly, combat in Bloodlines has issues of its own. First, Altair doesn't have the counter grab ability in this game, so if enemies grab you, there is literally nothing you can do. The bigger issue, though, is a problem with responsiveness inconsistency. Sometimes your actions are processed with a delay. Not always, but often enough that you'll fail a combo attack even though you shouldn't have, or miss a counter window even though you've pressed the correct inputs at the appropriate time. The last gameplay aspect Bloodlines has to tackle is social stealth. And here one of the most important factors is the fact that in Assassin's Creed 1 the actual count of NPCs on the map doesn't matter, only whether you yourself are acting in a socially acceptable way or not. NPCs are there mostly for atmosphere, so mechanically the two games are practically identical. There are some things absent from Bloodlines, like jack carriers, which has led to the gentle push action being cut too, as well as benches with blend groups, but the absence of those doesn't change the gameplay drastically. But still, how does Bloodlines tackle the fact that the limit of NPCs has been decreased from about 100 to around 7, with lots and lots of tricks? First, the game constantly spawns NPCs in the direction you're moving and despawns them from behind. This is easy to notice if you decide to run around the same building over and over again. You will keep finding new NPCs or guards, and ones you have gone past before would be nowhere to be seen. Of course, normally players wouldn't just run around like that, so there is a lot of technical ingenuity in this aspect. When you assassinate somebody on the streets, if there are no guards nearby to investigate, then Bloodlines spawns one. And if you are in a chase, the game also has a system of despawning guards that are too far away and spawning someone closer to you to simulate the long chases that the first Assassin's Creed has. Different tricks are applied to cutscenes as well. For example, there is a mission where you need to stop an execution. The cutscene actually doesn't show the whole area. At first it shows only the execution platform itself, and then it shows Altair within the crowd of around 5 people, but very close, so it would feel like the crowd is bigger. And then gameplay starts only after Altair reveals himself and the people disperse in fear, so you're left only to fight with the guards. With this type of tricks, Assassin's Creed Bloodlines feels much larger in scope than it actually is. It applies to city design as well. Each city is divided into a number of walled-off smaller districts between which you travel through loading screens, and each district has one or two big memorable landmarks. It can be a cathedral, an entire citadel, or a market, and that makes it feel memorable and distinct. So even though each area is pretty small, it still feels like a large city. There are missions which send you to different districts or span across several districts themselves, and that also helps with the feeling of them feeling larger than they are, as you're not limited only to doing things within the district you're in. The missions themselves are for the most part nothing too complex, but they provide variety. The broad structure of Bloodlines is similar to Assassin's Creed. Every sequence you need to participate in investigations before going to assassinate your next target. There are two big differences. These investigations are a linear sequence of varying missions rather than a more open selection, and all your tasks are directly based on core gameplay verbs and not the more overall atmospheric actions that Assassin's Creed 1 would have you do. So you won't have any eavesdropping or pickpocketing in this game, but you will have plenty of assassinations, open combat, infiltrations to take an object, beating up people for information, or chases. The game doesn't care about HUD-less design like Assassin's Creed 1 did, so in many ways you will have to rely on icons a lot to know where to go. Though a technical issue present in Bloodlines is the fact that the way icons are placed on minimap is not entirely representative of their actual positions. There seems to be some error in scale depending on your distance from the destination, so you can have situations like when at first you might think the person you're searching for is standing outside the roofed market, but they're actually inside it. The actual mission design in the open world is pretty limited by the 7-person within a certain area limit, so even the task to infiltrate a citadel within one district is not going to be something exceptionally elaborate. But it still works for the purposes of providing a nice little task to do. If only the core parkour gameplay would act consistently, they would feel even nicer. Most missions are actually open-ended in how you can approach them, but some do have arbitrary fail conditions, which sometimes don't make sense in the context of the story. The most egregious one being when you need to chase a certain Templar agent. If you fail to catch up, you'll fail because the agent ran away. If you do catch up, the Templar agent still runs away. So it can be especially annoying when you fail the mission because Altair would parkour inconsistently, only to essentially not catch up with the enemy in the story anyway when you do succeed. The best missions in the game are the actual assassination ones. They take place not in the open world cities, but in areas specifically designed for each assassination. They are linear but with branching approach paths, meaning that you can take a variety of routes on your way to the target, and that choice is enough to create a feeling of the areas feeling more like a sandbox would. The sad thing about these missions though is that each assassination is actually in reality a boss battle. Even if you reach the target without being noticed by anyone or raising any alarm, you will always be forced to fight. And these fights aren't anything special either, you mostly just block and hit, and sometimes dodge in case of unblockable attacks. To its credit, Bloodlines tries to add variety with how the bosses act, but in the end the fights still remain very similar in nature. Still, each assassination mission does feel like a special event, which is in line with the core loop and structure of Assassin's Creed. One part of Bloodlines that is a definite improvement over the console Assassin's Creed is the collectible aspect. You collect Templar coins in this game, and there is not 420 of them in total, which is already great, but just 6 in each district. And these coins actually have value. You can use them to purchase upgrades for Altair in the Animus. These upgrades do not include any new special skills, and honestly you can beat the game without them, but it still makes collectibles feel pretty meaningful. You also get coins for doing little side missions for the civilians in need of help and members of the resistance requiring assistance, again tying them up pretty nicely with overall progression. And I don't think there's much else to discuss in terms of design, so let's open up all the possible scores. I will assign a 6 to Assassin's Creed Bloodlines. There's a lot to like here, but also far too many flaws. And if semi-boss battles or arbitrary mission fail conditions could be easily forgiven, parkour and combat gameplay is too inconsistent, and being core mechanics, it affects the experience a lot. Still, it shouldn't be underestimated just how ambitious Assassin's Creed Bloodlines is. It might not feel like it in comparison to the console Assassin's Creed, but putting this experience on a PSP requires a lot of work and effort, and the team from Griptonite Games has done many creative solutions to put Assassin's Creed in your pockets. Now let's talk about context. This category has a weight of 1 as it's about things that enhance the experience rather than define it. Plot, characters, arcs, etc. Assassin's Creed Bloodlines serves as an intermediate point between Assassin's Creed 1 and 2. As such, it has a quite difficult task ahead of it. Not only does it need to tell a good standalone story about Altair, but also it needs to provide additional lore and context that would be relevant to Assassin's Creed 2. More specifically, how Altair would get together with Maria, formerly his Templar enemy. They are briefly shown together in Assassin's Creed 2, and it would be interesting information for players, and how Altair's Apple of Eden got to Cyprus, which Ezio would get in Assassin's Creed 2. Now, some hardcore fans at this point might note that Altair actually didn't hide his apple on Cyprus, but we'll discuss this series of retcons when the time comes. In 2009, at the time of release of Bloodlines and Assassin's Creed 2, Altair's apple was heavily implied to be hidden on Cyprus, and Bloodlines will tell the story of the island getting liberated from Templar control, which is why Altair would use it as a hiding place, describing it in his codex, which we see Altair write in this game as well. Anyway, let's move away from the lore part for a bit and talk about the core of this game's story, the relationship between Altair and Maria. Altair has met Maria once in the first Assassin's Creed game, where she acted as a decoy for the Templar leader Robert de Sab. Altair has let her go because she wasn't his target. What I really appreciate about Bloodlines is how realistic it is in depiction of Maria's character arc. It would have been so easy to make her and Altair arbitrarily fall in love within the first couple hours of the game, because for all intents and purposes that's the relationship we see in Assassin's Creed 2, but you don't just fall in love with your enemy and arbitrarily put aside all your differences. So the story Bloodlines depicts is not actually a love story, but how Altair and Maria went from being enemies to not enemies. Your first boss battle in the entire game is going to be against Maria, and only at the very end do you actually work together for the first time, becoming a nice bookend for the relationship that was full of mistrust at the beginning. Altair would hold Maria hostage and she would constantly try to escape, and Maria wouldn't turn against the Templars immediately. She is very loyal to the cause, which actually retroactively humanizes the Templar leader from the first game, who was the only one that saw worth and talent in her. The rest of the Templars are openly misogynistic towards Maria, calling her inclusion in the Templar Order a mistake.
De Sab was a weak-willed wretch. Verse 70 of the founding Templar rule expressly forbids consorting with women, for it is through women that the devil weaves his strongest web. De Sab ignored this tenet and paid with his life.
How dare you!
Touched a nerve, did I? Lock her up!
But even after being branded a traitor due to seemingly cooperating with the assassin Altair, as she has survived all encounters with him, Maria still tries to gain back the trust of her order. It is only through many little steps does she gradually get more doubts about the Templars and gain respect for Altair.
It presents us with challenges, yes, but freedom yields greater rewards than the alternative. The order and peace that the Templars seek requires servility and imprisonment.
I know the feeling.
And even then, after openly confronting the Templars about the true nature of their cause and getting fully disillusioned with them, she doesn't start working with Altair immediately.
2 of them and 2 of us.
This adds a lot of humanity and believability to their relationship. Their final conversation in Bloodlines is but a hint of love that will blossom between them in the future, but there's still ways to go before that. I respect the restraint of Bloodlines in this regard. It has defined the core of the story extremely well. The rest is fine, I guess. Don't get me wrong, Bloodlines features an intriguing and thought-out plot with its fair share of mystery, betrayal, and plot twists, but the character cast is not fit to lead such a story. Your allies Alexander and Marcos could literally be the same person, they even have similar looks, and the antagonists are not particularly intriguing either. They are plot vessels, tools to drive the story forward which would advance the relationship of Altair and Maria, but are not interesting as characters by themselves. Bloodlines does feature tidbits that will be interesting to fans of the series, like Altair writing his thoughts about life in what would become the codex we collect in Assassin's Creed 2, and the location of the Templar archives that would be the hiding spot Altair would choose for the apple. Once again though, at the time of this game's release, I know. But still, this handheld spin-off doesn't forget that Assassin's Creed is about examining actual outlooks on life, the philosophy by which you live, so it is always appreciated when it adds moments related to that. Now, you might notice that I haven't mentioned anything about the modern day, and that's because Assassin's Creed Bloodlines doesn't have it at all beyond the overall concept that everything is happening within Abstergo's Animus, so there is not much to discuss there. Let's open up all the scores for context. I will assign a 7. Assassin's Creed Bloodlines succeeds at providing an interesting examination of how two enemies might turn into allies, which is the most important part of the story. The rest is just enjoyable, but also that's more than enough. Let's move on to aesthetics. This category also has a weight of 1, as it's again about things that enhance the experience rather than define it, this time through visual style, music, sounds, etc. Given that Assassin's Creed Bloodlines tries to mimic Assassin's Creed 1, to the point of even recreating some things like making the clothes of people feel worn so the world would feel lived in, I don't really have anything to say about the actual aesthetic part of the experience that I didn't already say in another video. The differences lie more so in the implementation aspect of things. For example, voice acting is not quite as good.
This port is off limits. Show your face.
Nothing under this hood but an ugly old assassin.
Altair?
Alexander, you got my message.
I assumed it was a Templar trap. Who is the woman?
Templar bait. She was Robert de Sab's girl.
Don't belittle me, murderer. I'm a Templar too.
Unfortunately, she's a bit of a burden.
We can hold it for you, Altair. We have a secure safe house.
Good. I'm going to have a look around. I'll meet you there.
I mean, it's fine, I guess, but nothing special. Music is reused from Assassin's Creed, but not enough of it, so you'll hear the same track over and over again quite a lot, especially the ambience between missions. Then there's the purely technical aspect of frequent pop-ins and LOD changes. Bloodlines really pushes to the limit the possibilities of a PSP, so it is understandable why such things are there, but it's still noticeable. Though it doesn't change the fact that overall everything is pretty high quality. The animations are good, there are a lot of nice little touches, even chicken running around, the sound design takes a lot of the best parts from Assassin's Creed, there are issues, but it's solid. This is why, should you open up all the possible scores for aesthetics, I will assign an 8 to Bloodlines. Probably the best praise one can give to this game is that just by a single look at it you can see that it's a direct continuation of the first Assassin's Creed, and that says a lot about its aesthetic qualities, even though there are some areas that would benefit from additional polish. Now let's move on to Cohesion. This category has a weight of 2, and it's about how well the game connects all of its aspects into a wholesome, holistic experience. Assassin's Creed Bloodlines perhaps doesn't provide a singular wholesome fantasy as strong as that one from the first Assassin's Creed, but it still has a lot of neat things that connect different aspects of the game together. For example, even though Bloodlines uses tricks to try and place as many NPCs in our path as possible, there is still not a lot of them. But the story makes sure to mention that, yes, cities do feel like ghost towns a bit, and that's because people are afraid to go out due to the surrounding turmoil. So by contextualizing that part, Bloodlines has not only softened the blow caused by PSP's technical limitations, it transformed it into lore. And honestly, this is the type of lore I probably love the most. Then Altair doesn't lose any of his abilities from the first game, outside of those that sadly had to be cut, so we're not going through the process of learning all the skills all over again, and the upgrades that are in the game make Altair's existing skill set stronger. Though it's sort of questionable why upgrades are purchased through Templar coins, as even in the context of this game it's not even money, but sort of an abstract currency that increases our synchronization with the ancestor, so something more related to the animus would probably work better. But that said, the Templar coins themselves are clearly an animus construct in this game, not something real, so it still can work. As mentioned before, people who provide side missions are either citizens that need help or resistance members that need you to do something for the cause, and in both cases it is understandable why Altair would complete these missions. And there are points where Altair is hunted by either pirates or fanatics, and at those moments the game replaces the standard guards on the streets with, well, pirates or fanatics. Which seems like a logical thing to do, but it is also easy to either miss that or not have enough time to implement this kind of little feature. Another cool piece of cohesion that I like in Bloodlines is the connectivity rewards with the PS3 version of Assassin's Creed 2. Now, usually I don't care for such rewards as there's some little harmless fluff made mostly with marketing purpose in mind, and in Bloodlines these rewards aren't really something amazing either, but if you find certain codex pages in Assassin's Creed 2, then when connecting to Bloodlines, Altair will receive some skills that he will define in that codex, including the ability to block with the hidden blade and the first version of the hidden gun. And it makes sense because in this game we would see Altair actually writing the codex himself. It's a very nice way to transform what is essentially a marketing ploy to buy both games on Sony platforms into some nice lore-related connections that fans will enjoy. Still, there are things that sort of bring Cohesion down somewhat, as if they were done for a different game or franchise. For example, the boss design of some characters, like that of the Bull, doesn't fit the more realistic nature of Assassin's Creed enemies. And then there is the Witch, also known as the Oracle, who is weird. Like, she's said to have powers to foresee the future, but that also seems to be just a myth and she just has knowledge the Templars need. But also she's in this dark cell and during her boss battle she disappears in the fog and appears out of nowhere and attacks with claws. But then she was driven mad by her captivity. She's inconsistent stylistically, but ultimately all that really doesn't matter as the Witch's role in the actual story is very minimal. And then after the final showdown with the Templar leader Armand Bouchard, the archives we're in suddenly start collapsing for no reason, just like it will happen in some sort of final magical temple one would find in the related to Assassin's Creed franchise, Prince of Persia. It's these kind of things that prevent me from assigning what otherwise would fit the score of 9, so I'll have to assign an 8. Assassin's Creed Bloodlines has a lot of things that purposefully connect together even technical limitations with the story, but there's too many to ignore things that don't quite fit or feel out of place. We're getting to our final category, emotions. This is the most subjective part of my whole scoring system, but it has the second biggest weight, 3. It is all about personal emotions, and let's face it, at the end of the day those matter a lot. Assassin's Creed Bloodlines is a thoroughly enjoyable game. Yes, there are frustrating moments like the inconsistent gameplay, and yes, within its story you won't find a lot of interesting characters to care about, but it's good! Maybe if you don't like Assassin's Creed you won't really find much to enjoy here, but here's the thing, I like Assassin's Creed. And I really liked going through and almost 100% in this little concentrated piece of handheld Assassin's Creed experience, which is why I am assigning a 9 for emotions. For me, this was a thoroughly enjoyable game, even if it doesn't do enough to make me reach some emotional highs that other Assassin's Creed games do. Let's conclude our video. After all scores and their weights are taken into account, Assassin's Creed Bloodlines gets a final Stasocritic rating of 72. It is a good, solid title. I would even call it underrated, as I find that many seem to think of it as some sort of inferior Assassin's Creed experience, but also I noticed that a big part of people who think like that hadn't actually played it. So look, if you're an Assassin's Creed fan, you definitely should try this game out. If you haven't, I don't think you'll regret it. If you're not, you can still find fun in it as long as you're ready to accept a number of gameplay flaws. But regardless if you're going to like it or not, it really doesn't change the fact that Assassin's Creed Bloodlines is quite a fascinating game. Just imagine all the things that had to come together for it to come into existence. The need of a spin-off title and a handheld to go alongside a big console release, a handheld powerful enough for an open-world experience but not powerful enough for full recreation of the console Assassin's Creed, which has led to an ambitious project that will do everything it could to simulate that console experience regardless. If it would happen just a year or two later, it wouldn't be able to exist in its form, as by that point Sony would have PSP's successor, the Vita. And just to reiterate how fascinating this project is, imagine that it's Assassin's Creed on a PlayStation 2. That's kind of mind-blowing, isn't it?